Right. Hello, hello again. Hi. I'm glad everybody really took seats and settled in. It's nice. It's great to look out and see everybody. Good evening. I'm Jason Linetsky, and as director of the Anderson Collection at Stanford University, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here in celebration of our really illustrious guest, Lita Albuquerque, who is presenting tonight as our McMurtry lecturer, and whose incredible work is on view as part of our Stellar Access Antarctica show here in the museum. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to read Stanford's land acknowledgement. Stanford sits on the ancestral land of the Muwekme Ohlone tribe. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people. Consistent with our values of community and inclusion, we have a responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and make visible the university's relationship to Native people. Thank you. Yeah, please, please. Applause are welcome at all moments that you feel like applauding. I really have to begin by saying what an absolute pleasure it has been for the Anderson Collection at Stanford University to collaborate with Lita Albuquerque on Stellar Access Antarctica. The relationship that developed over the course of the planning of this exhibition provided such exciting opportunities to think collectively about which spaces in the museum we would work with, which artworks we would showcase, and ultimately the inspiring and really almost performative act of the installation itself here at the museum. It was incredibly special to have had Lita on site orchestrating and composing the installation in the Wish Family Gallery that day, 1 week before our installation, our exhibition was to open. That composition, that putting together of her paintings, her sculpture, her film, the sound and the photography was really the moment when everything came together. All of the elements that went into this show really would not have happened without the dream team of Lita Albuquerque, of her studio assistant Kiyomi Matsura, who was on site with Lita during the installation, and who worked really closely together with two key members of the Anderson Collection staff, Mark Shunny, who is the exhibition designer and lead preparator, and Jean McDougall, who is our senior registrar. Truly the dream team, and I'm grateful to everybody for their collaborative nature in putting together this incredible show. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. What a treat we're in for tonight as Lita, who thinks deeply about the places we come from, the places we are going, what guides us, and the ways we are connected, reflects on Stellar Access Antarctica and her journeys before and after. I've really been so moved by Lita's deep attention to experience, to being present in the moment, and to illustrating perceptual shifts that highlight our interconnectedness. That focus really feels especially important and essential today in these polarizing times, to be reminding us really of our presence, our impact, and the relatedness in the world that we all have and that we all call home. Lita Albuquerque was on the core faculty of the Graduate Fine Art program at Art Center College of Design for more than 35 years. I have that right? Yes. Lita is an internationally recognized multidisciplinary artist and writer hailing from Los Angeles by way of an influential childhood spent in Tunisia. Her practice is one that investigates identity and the cosmos and strives to connect time and space on a human scale through painting, sculpture, and monumental and yet often ephemeral installations in the far reaches of our planet. Albuquerque's artistic practice emerged in the late 1960s and 1970s through encounters with artists living in and around Venice and Malibu, California, including influential painters that you know well, such as Richard Diebenkorn in the collections at Anderson and Cantor, Sam Francis in the collection at the museums here at Stanford, and the light and space artists, James Turrell, Robert Irwin, and Susan Kaiser Vogel. All amazing influences in many, many ways. Lita has long been fascinated by the impact of pure color and geometries on experience. In the later 1970s, she gained national attention with her ephemeral pigment installations pertaining to mapping and the cosmos that were executed in the natural landscape. In 1980, Lita garnered international acclaim for her installation, the Washington Monument Project, that led to awards and commissions at significant sites around the world, including the Great Pyramids in Giza, where she represented the United States at the International Cairo Biennial. Some guests in our audience today were just asking about why was Lita at the pyramids? So that will soon be answered. In addition to the National Science Foundation grant Lita received for Stellar Access Antarctica, she is the recipient of 3 National Endowment for the Arts, Art in Public Places Awards, an NEA Individual Fellowship Grant, the 2019 Laguna Art Museum Wendt Artist of the Year Award, and LA MoCA's Distinguished Women in the Arts Award. In 2020, Albuquerque's major outdoor projects included Najma for Desert X Al Ula in Saudi Arabia, and Red Earth at the Huntington Botanical Gardens and Library in LA, marking their centennial. Lita's work continues to be featured in numerous exhibitions around the world, including the recent Light and Space retrospective at Copenhagen Contemporary Denmark, and the really amazing and groundbreaking exhibition Groundswell, Women of Land Art at the Nasher Sculpture Center in Dallas, Texas, which I think Lita will be returning to before long. Not surprisingly, her work is held by major museums around the world, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Getty Trust, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and the LA Museum of Contemporary Art. Before we all have the chance to hear from Lita, I'm excited to introduce you to our other guest, Terry Berlier, who will be in conversation with Lita later tonight in our program. Terry is a remarkable professor of art, by courtesy professor of music, and director of the Sculpture Lab and director of graduate studies in the Department of Art and Art History at Stanford University. Terry has been a wonderful collaborator, wonderful collaborator with the Anderson Collection over many years, and has arranged a special day tomorrow where Lita will graciously spend time with Stanford students and conduct studio visits for MFA candidates in art practice. Really an amazing opportunity, and I'm incredibly grateful, Terry, to you for helping to really facilitate all of that, as well as everything that you facilitated for the museums over the years. Terry is also an interdisciplinary artist who investigates the evolution of human interaction with queerness and ecologies. She has exhibited in solo and group shows in North America, Europe, Asia, South America, and Australia, including the Marc Chagall National Museum in France, Museum of Old and New Art in Australia, the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and the Contemporary Jewish Museum in San Francisco. Terry has received numerous residencies and grants, including the Creative Work Fund Grant, Center for Cultural Innovation Grant, the Zellerbach Foundation, and the Arts Council Silicon Valley Artist Fellowship. Terry's work has been reviewed and exhibited in publications, included in books, including University of California Press's Seeing Gertrude Stein, and the Slant Step book, The Mysterious Object that the artworks it inspires. Really fortunate, Terry, to have you here tonight. And before welcoming Lita first to the stage, I'd like to offer my thanks to many who have made tonight's program and our related exhibition possible. First, I thank the McMurtry family. The Burt and Deedee McMurtry Lecture was established upon the opening of the Anderson Collection at Stanford University almost 10 years ago, and has really allowed the museum to bring inspiring artists, thinkers, and creatives to campus to engage with our community and to engage with our student community and the university community. And we're incredibly grateful for the opportunities that that has provided and continues to provide. Stellar Access Antarctica came into being here at the Anderson Collection through the incredible collaboration of Putter Pence, Lucas Perrier, and Marcus Zuniga, and with the incredible loans of Lita Albuquerque. Grateful for everybody's participation and collaboration on this exhibition. It would not have been possible also without the generous support of museum members and donors. The Anderson Collection and the Cantor Arts Center are so grateful and appreciative of your continued support towards museum membership. Your generosity helps keep both museums free and open to the public and to our university community year-round. It also supports exhibitions, public programs, academic pursuits, and more. That support really provides the museums with critical operating funding that allows us to do all of the incredible work that happens at the Cantor and at the Anderson, and that gives us these opportunities to engage with the Stanford community, with the Bay Area, and beyond. So thank you all for your continued support to supporting all that happens at the museums. I'm also grateful for the unflagging support of colleagues here at Stanford, namely Deborah Cullinan, who is the Vice President for the Arts here at Stanford University, and who has done so much to really center the role of art as essential in university life. Also, my great thanks to Anne Shulock, who is the Assistant Vice President of the Arts, who continues to work her magic on everything she touches. Mari Jose Alvarado is Marketing Manager, who really executed all of the invitations and the save the dates and the confirmations that you received via email. You may not have been here without that. And to Lanisha Brown, who is our Exhibitions and Events coordinator, and Claire Kwan from the Office of VPA, whose collaboration and endless hard work really brought us this program here tonight. So lastly, a thanks to all of you for joining us, for making this such a special night. And I encourage those that haven't already written down questions for our guests, Lita and Terry, to do so. There are questions, there are sheets of paper and pencils. If you'd like to contribute anything during this talk, please do, and leave them in the basket, and we will address them as we can as the night goes on. And so without further ado, I welcome first Lita Albuquerque.
Thank you, Jason. What an incredible welcome. And I want to thank the staff for we worked so beautifully together to create this installation. Jason and Jean and Lanisha and Mark, who put together this really great installation for the film. I'm really excited to be here. I want to thank Pence and her wonderful Anderson collection, Lucas Perrier. I wouldn't be here without the two of you. And of course, the university, and Deedee and Burt McMurtry, who without this lecture. Well, everything counts, you know, and this is part of it. And we live in this incredible world where you never know what's going to happen next. And I didn't know how I was going to feel when I came this morning. And I couldn't help but think of my 11-year-old self when I first came to this country. And my mother first took us to Northern California, and I thought we were going to move here and we first went to Berkeley and to Stanford. And I thought I was so in love with with intellect, and wanted to be here and to find myself now talking at Stanford. I'm just incredibly, incredibly grateful. I want to start with a meditation that I do that came to me quite a few years ago that astronomers call the cosmic address. It's very simple. It's about reality. And it's about the moment. So you can close your eyes if you want. And I will start. Today is Wednesday, April 24th of the year 2024 at 6:48 p.m. at Stanford University at the Anderson Collection in Palo Alto, California, United States of America, Northern Hemisphere, of planet Earth, third planet from our soul star, nestled in the Orion arm of our Milky Way galaxy, next to the Virgo cluster of galaxies, next to the Super Great Cluster, next to Lanakeia, the supercluster containing hundreds of billions of galaxies. We wait for a moment, then come back to the Super Great Cluster, to the Virgo cluster, to our Milky Way galaxy, where in Orion's arm is a beautiful solar system and our planet Earth, third from our soul star. We come down in the Northern Hemisphere, in the United States of America, in the state of California, in the city of Palo Alto, at Stanford University, in the Anderson Collection, on Wednesday, July 24th of the year 2024 at 6:50 p.m. It took us 2 minutes. I love to do this because it just puts us in the present moment. A lot of people talk about metaphysics, but we're really talking about reality. That is what's happening. And I had an incredible experience in 2017. It was the Great American Eclipse of 2017. I was in Wyoming. And when at totality, they tell you to take your glasses off, I had this experience that was so extraordinary in that I could see the moon, and like the moon as a total globe, and the space in between the moon and the sun. And so that it was the sphere of the moon, the sphere of the sun, and therefore where we were, where the earth is. And I could really physically, visually see that we are in space. I just came back from MIT. I gave a lecture in the digital program there, and everybody's talking about outer space, but we are in space, and that is so beautiful. And I think I've dedicated my life in a way to bring that more and more. I mean, it's obvious, and to bring that more and more into our awareness of what this planet is, what Buckminster Fuller calls, the great, that it's a spaceship. Out of that, so I think a lot about the Earth as a sculpture in space, and I came up with this sentence that seems to be appropriate, that if the Earth is a sculpture in space, then the cosmos is an installation in which we partake in every day. And I think that scale we can hold in our minds, but it's that experience can happen through art. And so that is what I think we all do as artists. I was really happy that when Lucas and I organized this, we were wondering in the beginning, what we were going to show, and that we decided on stellar axis. So I want to read the first quote that in the book, Stellar Axis, that's written on the walls in the show. It came from my diary when I went to Antarctica. As we look at this perfect blue sphere in the middle, as we look at this perfect blue sphere in the middle of the whiteness with the light of the sun at 1 o'clock in the morning, a sun which feels like it should come from another direction. The reason we had come to the other end of the world to do this becomes obvious right here in front of our eyes. There is no way to describe it except to say that in its opaqueness, the blue orb draws into itself all the energy of the mountains as if the blue takes in the vast expanse of whiteness and transforms its icy blue vapor into ultramarine. So I'll start with the very first piece that I did. Uh-oh. This was done in 1978. I had been a painter, and very dramatically, I decided I'd stop painting. I was going to go out in the world. I thought I meant to the world. I ended up going into the earth itself. And I was influenced by Robert Irwin, who had done a project in a gallery in a white cube, had done a black tape line at the eye level. And it completely changed how I thought about everything, because all of a sudden this one gesture made the gallery into 2 volumes. And I thought, I got it, that art is not just a 2-dimensional surface in space. It is about space as well. So I decided to do these gestures. And this one came from this artist colony where I lived in. And at the time I was taking dance, I was very aware of the verticality of my body. And as I looked at the horizon line, I noticed that my verticality and the horizon formed a cross. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I wonder if that's how symbols are formed, through the interrelationship of man or humans in the environment. So that's the first piece I did. The next one, this was a boulder that was on this artist colony where I lived. And I had been in the desert in Death Valley, and I wanted to cover the entire mountain range in blue pigment. The idea of connecting the earth with the sky, of course, I was stopped. So I did this one piece. And this was where, I call this moon shadow. This is where the moon set at the time. This is called, very simply, rock and pigment installation, but what it was my very first time that I aligned objects in nature to the stars. It's a star alignment piece. So, and then I put color on the rocks. A little later on, I did this piece called Spine of the Earth, which was inspired by Australian Aborigines, how they literally sit in the middle of a spiral to connect with the earth. And this was very simple. I did a cross, a spiral, a square, a circle, and a diamond, and it was aligned to the directional lines. But the idea of the piece was that from the ground, you couldn't see it. And it was only when I went up in the air that what was revealed was this cube that was coming out of the earth. So that was one of the first pieces that I was interested in, showing the different ideas of perspective, that what we have here, right, what we live every day, but what if taken from another perspective is a whole other language. This was a detail of it. In 1980, as Jason said, I did this project around the Washington Monument. It was for the International Sculptural Conference. And this came out of 2 dreams that I had. One of them was that I had just gone to the Walter de Maria lightning field, and in the dream I saw a very long pole that cast a huge shadow. And on one side of it were the first 33 years of my life, and on the other, the next. And also, the other dream was I saw a red pyramid in the center of the earth. And I thought, well, why don't I use the monument as a way of a fantasy of locating this red pyramid? And this is what I did. Much later on, I represented the U.S. at the biennial, 1996 biennial. And I was very lucky to be able to work near the pyramids. And at that time, I did a lot of meditation, and this image came to me in the meditation of the Earth from space that had one continent. and it was in the shape of a honeybee. And I thought, well, that's really intriguing. What does this mean? And I researched it, and it turns out that the honeybee was a symbol of Lower Egypt, as you can see in this hieroglyph. And so I was also studying the pyramids themselves, the shafts that are aligned to certain stars inside the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid, and reading Plato at the same time, who talked about how each soul comes from a star and goes back to its star. So I thought, well, maybe the bee is the symbol, is the carrier of the soul going back to its star. So I wanted to do a piece about that. So I decided to do a geometry that came off of the geometry of the pyramids, to do a honeycomb pattern. This was one of the first thoughts that I had, just strictly out of that. Oops. So different ways of representing the hexagonal pattern. What I found also very interesting is that Pythagoras used to have his students meditate on the hexagonal pattern that he believed was in the universe. And interestingly enough, the pyramids are, the shape of them fit into a hexagonal pattern as well. And so obviously I wasn't going to do something in the sky, but I was going to represent nature, the language of nature, the honeycomb, with blue powdered pigment. What happened was that I gave the design to a surveyor, to be precise, and he thought I was, he blew them up, and he thought I was a Jewish spy, that I was putting hundreds of Stars of David into the ground, and they stopped the project. So that was wild. The biennial was coming on, and the week went through, and finally I said, well, the biennial's opening, and I almost got put in jail, actually. Then I said, well, I have another project, and that's to place the pyramids in a field of stars. There is a theory that the pyramids are aligned to Orion's belt. And so I thought, okay, I'll take it from there. And they said, okay, we don't see anything wrong with that. So the Orion theory, the Orion constellation theory, came from this engineer, Egyptian engineer, who looked at this image. It was a military photograph, and noticed that the meridians weren't exactly aligned. And he thought, oh my God, it looks just like Orion's belt. So that's how that came about. So we ended up putting 99 blue spheres, blue powder pigment circles in the ground, all aligned to the stars. From that project, as I was at the pyramids, again, images just come to me at certain spaces, especially things like monuments and stones. I think that stones really contain a lot of information. Leonardo da Vinci thought that they were containers that recorded history. And I had this image that came to me of the Earth from space again. But this time, there was nothing on the planet except gold-tipped pyramids, all aligned to the stars. And I thought, oh my God, what a beautiful image, because obviously we are surrounded in stars. It's not just the sky. And so I lived with that for a long time. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was so enraptured with the image. Obviously, I wasn't going to do gold-tipped pyramids, but I could do points of stars. I had done star alignments before. And this is kind of a dream I still have of doing them all over the world. But years later, I was on an airplane, and I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll start at the North and South Poles, as if at that time nobody was going to the poles. But I had no idea how I was going to do it. And this shows you what it's like. But coming from the idea that we're in space, we're somewhere around 4 o'clock there. So I wanted to do it both at the North and South Poles. and if you take two stars from at the North Pole and also at the South Pole, and through the rotation of the Earth, you get what, I'll get to it. You get to what resembles the double strand of the DNA connected to the stars. So if you take two stars here, two stars there, the Earth is rotating around the sun, and so we're totally connected through light. So how do I get there? I had an incredible studio assistant, Rochelle Fab, who was also a performance artist, but she had ways of figuring things out. At one point, we had no money whatsoever, and we thought there was an expedition going down the North Pole. These people think that there's a hole at the North Pole, and it's called a flat Earth theory. I was even willing to do that, just to go. and thank God I was friends with Simon Bond, who's an astronomer who had been at the South Pole for an entire year on a National Science Foundation grant. And his girlfriend knew that the National Science Foundation gives grants to artists. So that started us on an incredible 3-year projection of getting this grant. We got it, and we were able to go. We had to test. So I decided that instead of just powder blue pigment, you can't have anything that's particles in Antarctica, that I would do spheres. But we had to test them because it's the windiest continent in the world. And it goes to about 110 miles per hour winds. So we had these kinds of testing that we managed. Then we fabricated the spheres in California, and they got shipped to New Zealand, then airlifted to Antarctica. Then I wasn't exactly sure where I was going to do it. I had a team of 4 and myself, so 5. Simon Baum, who was the astronomer. Lionel Cousin, who was the filmmaker. Sophie Pegram was also a filmmaker, and Jean de Pomeroy, who was a photographer. None of them are people who install things, but we all did. And so this was a mapping, right? This is what was the 99 brightest stars in the sky in the southern hemisphere. And it was really wonderful to go up on a helicopter and to be able to see it from the air. This is another shot of it in this extraordinary landscape. I think this was a line to the Southern Cross, this particular one. We reduced it to 400 feet in diameter, and Simon and I essentially decided where they would go. I can say a lot more about this toward the end. Next, I didn't know this was going to happen so fast, but I wanted to go to the North Pole as well. And the only way to go there was to have a residency aboard a Russian nuclear icebreaker. And I got the residency, which meant what I really did there was to show the tourist how to draw polar bears. And so that was so I didn't have a lot of time, but we went. It was an extraordinary experience. And I engaged all the people who went there as an expedition to do the motion of the stars at the poles, at the North Pole. And so there you see them down there beginning a spiraling motion. And this is one sphere that I brought, and it was aligned exactly to 90 degrees north. You don't know where you are except on the compass that says 90 degrees north. And it was just this incredible experience of also having been to the South Pole in just 6 months earlier, so that in a year's time, I'd been to both poles. And yeah. A lot to say about that. The next project I did was for the Getty Museum for their Pacific Standard Time exhibit. They wanted me to redo Spine of the Earth, and I decided it couldn't be done in the desert, and so they wanted me to do it in a state park, and I decided to use people instead of pigment, and a skydiver as well. My husband's a skydiver, so I had access to that, and we had somebody come all dressed in red with red smoke, and she landed on a dime, and then 300 of us went around her in a spiral. There she is. And essentially formed this spine in the earth. You can see people down there looking. And people who were driving on the freeway could see it. That was another project called An Elongated Now. And originally I was going to have people, I wanted them to parallel the arc of the beach. This is for the Laguna Museum of Art. And I wanted them to stand at sunrise, at noontime, and at sunset. And my daughter, who was a choreographer, said, "You've got to be kidding. You cannot have people stand there for that long." So I decided, okay, just the sunset. And they actually stood for a couple of hours to watch the night come in. And then they went into the museum where I did this project called Particle Horizon. And it was the first time I used a character that I started. It was a project that I wrote in 2003. This was in 2014, of a 25th century female astronaut who comes to the planet to remind us of our connection to the stars. And here she is lying down, and there was I think I have the documentation here, but what you're seeing is a video, an animation of the rotation of the stars at the North Pole, at the South Pole, and at the equator.
Enough Akru Nanki Mezar Hadar Sadar Shadar Spika Arneb Pollux Bakru Denham Alnath Menkant Merok Jama Go 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 Ega Rigel Marak Alta Anka Markov Arnak Monka
Trong về tờ phun bê kì thông thông về cùng về một cái kỹ thuật thông và cho thế về con bé đấy.
Enough Aku Nanki, Mezor, Hadar, Sato, Shadar, Spiker.
So what this was after the Stellar Access project, what I wanted to do was to work with a composer to have the singing of the 99 names of the stars in the southern hemisphere. And Robbie C. Williamson was a composer, and that's what he came up with. And so we did an installation at the USC Fisher Museum. What you saw was a trailer for a 28-minute film that was done as an installation. These are some stills. And we also did a performance with 9 singers. There were 3 rooms where the film was in different variations. And this gives you a few minutes of the performance of the singing of the stars.
Ki, Mezar, Spiker, Arnhem, Pollux.
So these are some still images. Again, you're talking about a 30-minute performance that we just showed a couple minutes. The next project was done for Desert X, and I call this Hearth, H, small h, and Earth in capital letters, and it was all about hearing and listening to the Earth. And here's a 25th century female astronaut listening to the Earth. I worked with the Los Angeles Master Chorale and did a performance, and also Jasmine Albuquerque, who's my daughter, who is the dancer and choreographer, and she is the astronaut.
Come here, why do you listen? What does it say to you? Why do you listen? Why did you come? Why do you listen? What does it say to
Here she is again. This is for a biennial in Switzerland, and she's on top of a mountain. And the next project is at the Antipode, which is exactly, if you drilled a hole where you are right now, where is it at the other end of the world? And it falls at the bottom of the sea off the coast of New Zealand. And that project hasn't been realized yet, but that's it's called Transparent Earth. This is another Desert X project in Saudi Arabia. And the 25th century female astronaut is presiding over a 2-mile long valley in the desert. And all around her are star alignments with blue powdered circles as well. And this was in January 2020. Some details of the sculpture. It was the first figurative sculpture done in Saudi Arabia, or in a Muslim country, in 1,000 years or more. And the wind came and created this extraordinary painting in the desert floor. The next project I'm showing you is a performance, again, of the 25th century female astronaut who here she is looking at the city of Cairo in 2022. And right on the other side is her walking toward the pyramids. And something happened there while she was experiencing this. There was this presence, this ancient presence, almost giving almost like a transmission. And she was so moved that she just fell to her knees in reverence. And this is a point where we're at now. So I think I'll finish here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that incredible overview of the work. It's just incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
you.
hear it up. Yeah. There's so many questions, but I want to start back just growing up in your childhood. And well, you were born in LA, but you grew up mostly in Tunisia and Paris. And how did that impact you? And then also being thrown back to LA at 11, 12.
Yes.
And learning a new language again and all that.
That was probably obviously one of the most impactful experiences. I mean, I thought I was from Tunisia, and I was there from the age of 5 months. The country is the nature there is very beautiful. I grew up in a Catholic convent in Carthage, overlooking the Roman ruins. And instead of living at home, I had nature, I had God, and the beauty of nature, of the poetry of the country itself, was just what I knew. And when we left, it was really this extraordinary rupture that I'm still grappling with. And so when I came to this country, I was young. Obviously, I was 11, and then I thought I was going to be a poet, and I wrote a lot. And then I got interested in acting, and then I started painting, and it was this kind of battle between painting and acting, and painting won. And I lived in Venice and Santa Monica, and so I was near what was happening at the time, which was the land art and light and space. And so I was around extraordinary art that really influenced me. But it really came from my feeling about the land in Tunisia, but then the light in California as well.
So your mother was a playwright, and your grandmother was a singer of classical Arabic music. And I'm really curious, and your mother, these amazing artists at that at that time, I'm just thinking of the struggle that they must have had. And I'm thinking, I know that your mother, I read that she had to write under a male name to get her first play published, and once she did, that was acclaimed. But the struggle of that, yes. So I'm just thinking about that rich environment of growing around these strong female artists, but also I imagine as you got older, you probably realized the struggle that they had of being women artists of that generation.
Yeah, I mean, we came from a fairly prominent family, a Jewish family in North Africa, and my mother was a real rebel, and her life was extraordinary, and she spanned the entire 20th century. She was born in 1910, and what she did I think she felt her mother struggle, but her mother was also the voice of Tunisia in 1934. She was asked to make sure that the music called Malouf was understood that it was Tunisian music, and she had her own orchestra, and she would go to Paris to make recordings. And so the struggle was my mother seeing her mother struggling. And then when I came around, by that time, my mother was no longer writing. So, that had a lot to do with a lot of those issues.
Yeah. So do you feel like that artistic being around all those amazing artists was like, it just seemed natural, like the thing to do? Like, did you ever not want to be an artist?
No, no. I mean, I thought I wanted to do something where I expressed myself. I didn't know where it was going to go. Originally I wanted to be a dancer. Then I wanted to be an actor, and a writer. It was never a question, of anything else.
Okay. So then you studied art history at UCLA and graduated in 1968.
Correct.
And then also studied at the Otis Art Institute, sculpture. And I'm just, you talked about the light and space movement happening at that time. So I imagine that was the influence, or were there particular faculty or outside of that were influential?
I think for me, it was more the artists that I was surrounded with rather than the professors. Art history at that time, I did have, there was one influential teacher Kurt von Meyer, who actually got fired for giving us art form as our textbook at that time. So it was quite traditional still. But my influences were all the artist friends that I was surrounded with.
And then I'm thinking about being a woman artist among these predominantly, especially at that time, male artists in the light and space movement and also the land art. And I'm thinking of the ephemeral nature of your works versus like a Michael Heiser, like removing the land, excavating it, exploding it, and yours having, just like being more in tune with the nature and temporary. And is that something you were conscious of, or that just was like a natural way to work with the land, or how did you get outside?
How did I get outside? I lived on this artist colony, which was 166 acres of land overlooking the ocean, one of these rare, incredible spaces. And so, and I always had a relationship to the outside, always to nature. But it was only because I had seen other people working out in the land. I don't know that I would have done it completely by myself. Having seen that, I then thought, well, I've got to go to these dry lake beds, and I wanted to see what color would look like in this minimal landscape. And so I always thought in terms of relationship to the land, to the earth. I think growing up in this convent overlooking the Mediterranean, I mean, that was what I attached myself to, was the rocks and the land itself and history.
Yeah. I'm thinking about stellar axis and the wall text talking about early, again, around this time you were in school, of seeing the first satellite image of Earth. And it makes me think of Stuart Brand in the Whole Earth catalog, who was an alumni of Stanford in 1960 and then goes on to make this counterculture magazine. And I was just curious, how did you I mean, I know it was the moon landing on Earth, and so this, at that time in the late 60s, this image was being circulated, but was the Whole Earth catalog and that movement something you were aware of or connected to?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was also a return to the land. 1970 was like a return to the land. I was married at the time to an artist, and 4 couples bought land up in Northern California near Laytonville, and we built a cabin, and dug water. There was a water, and we built a well, and so it was very much part of what was going on. In terms of the moon landing, I had this extraordinary experience. It almost seems unreal, but I was in Tunisia at the time with a friend of mine, and we were going down to the Sahara. And in the middle of the desert, not where there's nothing, but still desert, our car breaks down. And so we walk towards this farm. And it turns out that he knew the people whose farm it was. And we walk into their living room, and there's a TV, and we see the first step on the moon. Unbelievable. So that was one of these moments that you never, ever forget. And then after that, I talk a lot about that image. I mean, we're so used to it now. It's on every keychain, it's everything. But it's that image has started this revolution in perspective, that now it's no longer, the Renaissance. It's this, and again, seeing things it's the first time that we're outside being able to look back. And that's really the biggest influence, I think, on my work is that idea of looking from outer space.
Yeah. And then all the aerial images of the work, I think, really touches to that point, the connection to the stars, everything. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm also thinking about the site specificity of the works, and the ephemeralness and being in nature. But these are extreme environments. These are, I mean, we're a little chilly tonight because we're not having our perfect Palo Alto sun, but yeah, you're bringing these giant spheres to Antarctica. You're testing them in wind tunnels. I mean, as a nerdy sculpture question, like what are they made of? How are they not flying all over the South Pole? Like the physicality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just the objects though, it's the people in these spaces, and the effort and time and years dedication it takes to execute this scale of work, right?
Yeah.
And the the confidence or drive that you have to see those pieces through, and then to experience 24-hour sun in the South Pole, like these things that we take for granted, maybe that the sun goes up and comes down. But I think the change that happens when you experience that. I did a residency in Norway, and we had maybe dusk for like 3 hours, but it was like I worked for like 2 weeks, and I was like, oh my God, I have to sleep. Like I forgot my circadian rhythm got completely changed. So I'm just thinking like the extreme environments, like the physicalness of those objects, as well as the body. And I guess it is too about your body and our body, the viewer's body, in relation to how you cite the works.
Yeah, well, more than anything, I love having seeing things in different ways. So then, when there is 24 hours of light, it changes again your perspective, and it's interesting in that what I was following was the vision, right? It was the vision of seeing, of having these star alignments and doing them at the South and North Pole. So that's what I was following. And then of course, the extremeness of it was such an adventure. And just having all these, really it's the body, right? The body going through these different environments that changes how you think, essentially. In terms of the physicality of the piece itself, I had this amazing team in LA, and it took me a while to figure out what I was going to do in terms of how I was going to represent these star points. They ended up being fiberglass, and we made them in halves, and then nestled them and then shipped them out. And then when we were there, all of us, I mean, the five of us were literally carrying them, screwing them together. And we had to put 5 different points with rope so that they wouldn't fly away. So it was, I mean, this foundation was absolutely severe, that this can't fly. You've got to secure them, which we did. And it took that much more time and effort. But the amount of, I mean, now looking back, it is kind of amazing how most of these projects takes years and a lot of planning, a lot of people. And I guess it takes what it takes to make it happen. And it's, yeah. So,
yeah. Don't stop till it's done.
Yeah. Don't stop till it's done.
Yeah. That brings me to thinking about collaboration, and the joys and challenges of that. I know personally that it can be extremely difficult, and then it's also extremely rewarding, right? I don't know. And then I know you also work closely with your daughter, who's, and both of your daughters are, one's an amazing sculptor and one's an amazing choreographer and dancer. And I imagine that can get kind of tricky at times. I don't know if you're willing to share any of that.
Oh, yes. I didn't show the Liquid Light project, which was shot in Bolivia with my daughter. And it was one of these experiences where for the first time we really, it was very intense. And the film, we actually were both in the film, and there's a scene in there that's very dramatic of our relationship, even though it was more, the idea was that we weren't mother and daughter, but yeah, so that was one moment where it really happened. I love to collaborate. I tend to always have even any kind of anything. I always ask other people what they think about it, and so it's always this this thing, just like the airplanes going over, it's incorporated into what we do, that we're one system. And so, of course, the films, as with any film, that includes so many different kinds of talents, music and dance, and so. But but it's always the idea that I have this particular thing I want to accomplish, and it's wonderful to collaborate.
Well, yeah, and I think also the way you work with the way that bodies, when you have multiple bodies interacting with the site-specific installations, there's this, it touches again on this connectivity, right? Because it's like, it may be hundreds or 50 of people, but they become a line, or they become a unit, like they become a spiral. They become something greater than the individual.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if you could talk more about, like, just like connecting us beyond ourselves, which I think is what the work is doing, but then you actually literally do it in the way that you're bringing people together.
Yeah, I think one of the first experiences was with the Spine of the Earth, the one done for the Getty Museum. It was really interesting how the experience that we each had going down the stairs, it was 287 steps, and the experience of what it was that we had to do to form this line. But then, again, seeing it from the air was this greater thing. I had this myth that came to me called the remembrance of the myth of the golden bee. And the idea was, and I'm saying that to you to explain this idea, that in ancient times, before the continents were separated, the gods were, that different peoples in the earth had the practice of daily doing these mounds, and they knew that they had to do this, but that from the air it was in the shape of a golden bee, right? So it was, again, the idea that we do these things, but from a different perspective, it's a much greater idea. And I think that's our lives. If we could be that conscious, if we could possibly imagine that we are part of this extraordinary unit, that everything. I quote a lot this cultural historian Thomas Berry, who talks about that we're at the end of a story, of a 2,000-year-old story, and that what we need to do is to create a new story, and that new story is of us in the cosmos. And then he talks about 3 different universal laws. The first one being multidiversity, multiplicity, how each one of us is unique. The second one is the one that really inspired me the most. He talks about how each, whether it's a being or a rock or air or light or animals or any planet, has a subjectivity and an interiority that is continually expressing itself. And through that interiority and that expression, and through our multidiversity, we're all interconnected, right? So that's what's happening right now. And so and you see it everywhere now, how much the consciousness of everything that's alive. And I think if we could really, really see that, I mean, that's another reality, just like the cosmic address is a reality that we don't think about. That's another reality that we are starting to think about, right? That we're beginning to see the importance of every sentient being and how we're forming this pattern that we don't know. When I was 10 years old, I had this image that there was an image that we had forgotten as a humanity, and that that we were like little blades of grass, and that what we had to do is to dig within ourselves and then come back up, and it would be a mirrored surface. But it was only through that collective like mirrored surface that we would see that image once again. And it's that image of connectivity, right? And that's I think that's what's going on right now. I'm just starting a project that I call I'm forgetting the first word, but it's about the memory of the lost language of the cosmos. And I'm thinking of having 9 sites around the Mediterranean, and they would be simultaneously done, like these 3 giant red circles of powder pigment that it would be the periphery, so you couldn't see anything but red. It's not a possible project. I find it's one of those impossible projects, but that the idea is that we would all do this simultaneously, and that it's through that connectivity of doing that one thing together. That's the lost language of the cosmos, right? That's who we are. And I think that is another thing that's happening, that's beginning to happen, that hopefully we're beginning to see.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Sure. Yeah. One more question I have is thinking about risk taking in your practice, and when you started taking the painting and the pigment out into nature, maybe, but or you're talking about doing these impossible projects, like, and I think it's something we talk to students about a lot, about how to push things further. Like or I remember early drawing class, I thought I did a good drawing, and he was like, yeah, do about 500 more, you'll be out getting somewhere. And I was like, okay, that's fair. Now I can see that.
Right.
But yeah, so like, how does risk taking, or the impossibility?
I think it's huge. I mean, when I came up with, when I had that vision of the star alignment all over the planet, I mean, never would I ever thought that I would have done stellar axis, right? That seemed so out there. But I think you have, it's like everybody says it, you have to have that dream. And if you really have it, maybe it will happen. Right. But I think the vision is what's important, and the idea is what's important. And I think, again, collectively, if it's something like an impossible one, but if it's done collectively, we have more of a chance. Mm-hmm. And that's, yeah.
Absolutely. So there's some questions from the audience. Your work touches my soul. How has being a woman influenced your art, either a hindrance or a challenge or enhancement, and your place in the world and this cosmos? Just a small question.
Yeah. How has being a woman influenced? Well, I am a woman, and I don't think in terms of I'm making, that I don't create from being a woman. I create from this creative space. I think it certainly has been, in a way, it's interesting. It's like, yes, it's been so much more difficult. Absolutely. And I come from a generation where you don't expect things to happen because you're a woman, but I believed in never stopping in what I did. So even though I didn't think I could be like the men, but I never stopped. And I believed that I had to continually do what I do. So there is that, I think it's the creative force that makes you go. And I think, yeah.
It's fun. Can you comment on your connection to the blue pigment? That's so common in the work, and in terms of like celestial representations?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the very first inspiration for me for the blue is in North Africa and in Tunisia. There's the blue of the architecture, the blue and the white of the architecture that really reflects the sky. But in terms of art, I was very influenced by a friend of mine, Susan Kaiser-Vogel, who did her MFA project back in 1977 she calls it Blue Flame, and it was a room essentially outdoors, four brick walls that she, with no ceiling, that she then very lightly did a very light blue pastel. And so you enter it and you look up and her blue pastel just melted into the sky. This was pre-Terrell. And I again, that was another time where it really changed me. And I told her, I said, this is like amazing. And that was it. I was going to do projects that were going to be about connecting the earth and the sky.
There's someone asking about the delicate environments that you're working in, and the effects that the art might have on those environments. Can you speak about that sensitivity or ephemerality of them? Yeah,
I mean, I'm definitely very conscious of that. In Antarctica, it was very much part of creating something that would not affect the environment and would also be taken out of the environment. When I go out into spaces, it's been with organic pigments that are not toxic.
Okay, I think we have about time for one or two more. This is similar. Talking about daily practices that you find inspiration in. I know you do like a automatic daily writing practice, and I am guessing meditation, but could you say more about that?
Yeah, I start in the morning. This is almost a Stanford thing with Steve Jobs, actually, who 8 minutes of gratitude. It's something that he inspired me about, that I first did in my mind, just waking up, but then I couldn't hold it in my mind, so I decided to write. And so I've written 8 minutes of gratitude pretty much daily for at least 10 years now. So that's the beginning, but that's just like a practice. Then I do automatic writing, where I do very much like focusing on the time and date and location, and then I just let it flow. And at first it was very awkward, and I kept pushing it, and all kinds of things, information that I wouldn't have come up with came through. And then I go to the beach and I run, and I have this set of meditations that just came to me as I was running, and there's 3 of them. One of them that I do while I'm running. The first one I call arc meditation. So I'm running and I inhale from the sun to my heart and exhale from the sun, from my heart to the sun. And I do that 10 times. Then I do what I call the dome meditation. I've got my arms stretched out. I try and do it when no one's there. And I kick my heels up. So I'm running, and I throw my head back. And I do 33 breath of fires. It's a Kundalini breath practice where you pump your stomach. And I do that 33 times. And then I go back to the arc meditation 10 times, which kind of gives you living geometry, because as you do it different times of the day, the arc is different. And then again, 33 of the dome meditation, 10, 33 until I've done 40 of the arc meditation, 99, and the numbers mean something, but of the dome meditation, then 3 breaths that I just let go. And then I'm still running. I take my breath is out, and I bring the breath up through all the chakras, counterclockwise, and then clockwise, and then counterclockwise.
Well, as if Kundalini is not hard enough on its own without running, for those of you who haven't done Kundalini. Just one
run in the ocean.
One last quick question is, where does your name Albuquerque come from?
My father.
And what does it mean to you?
What does it mean to me? Oh my goodness. Well, I did not grow up with my father. My father has been, the absence of my father has been my whole why I do art. To bring absence into presence. And so to have his name, I was actually illegitimate. So to have his name means a lot to me. And it's a great name.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lita. This has been amazing.
Thank you, Terry. Really wonderful.
Thanks, everybody, for coming tonight.